8:12 a.m. In Nashville, a pale yellow desk lamp shining on wood, streaked with dried coffee, the phone vibrated just as I was reviewing the runbook. The screen popped up a sentence as neat as a hammer strike. "You're not worthy of the launch floor." From Cole Harrington, VP. I stared at the line as if it could retract itself, still pinching a paperclip and bending it into a hook without realizing it. The room was quiet, only the sound of the air conditioner and the smell of cold coffee. Outside the window, the Nashville sky was slanted blue. But inside me was a darkness both cold and clear. I am Maya Ellison, 28, Event and Brand Ops. For the past 3 months, I have built a rooftop product launch from zero, a venue contracted at the last minute, a menu tested 3 times to avoid allergies, lighting tests until midnight, the runbook tweaked back and forth by the minute. Invisible efforts wove through day and night, friendly reminder emails sent at 2-3 a.m. Like a reminder of who was up late, threads with the CC dropped right when crucial decisions were pressed. In the morning meeting, when I presented the guest movement flow, someone waved it off. "This part anyone can do." HR then invited me to a coaching with the standard smile, soft to fit culture. I sat up straight, clutching the bent clip in my hand, telling myself, team first is not self last. I was not born to be a soft cushion for carelessness called surface culture. Cole's message was less surprising than the moment it chose. Right as I pinned the last power diagram sheet to the board, right as everything was about to lock into place. A judgment sentence like slapping a label on someone's forehead for speed, as convenient as dragging a trash bin to the curb on a Tuesday night. I opened the calendar, circled the launch day in red, hit PTO. I booked a flight to Hawaii alone, light backpack, bringing a small notebook. When Slack blows up on that day, I will not reply. Because boundaries matter more than a late apology, and dignity is never to be bargained, especially when others want to pay with a long-expired culture coupon. I thought that after hitting PTO and booking a flight to Hawaii, my heart would quiet down. But before reaching the ocean, I still had to walk through one final headwind, the cracks so small the naked eye could hardly see them, yet enough to make the whole wall tremble whenever someone pushed against it. Those days, Nashville was in a harsh sunny season. In the morning, I arrived at the office early, grabbed a drip coffee from the pantry corner, added a packet of brown sugar to take the edge off the bitterness, then sat down at the desk where warm light pooled over the wood. The runbook was already open, the power diagram sheet, the vendor list, the setup durations, everything lined up as straight as the small flags on American porches during the holidays. I started the morning meeting with the production team. Just as I finished sketching the guest route from the elevator to the rooftop, Cole walked in, a seemingly friendly smile, an even voice. "This part is simple, anyone can do it." It wasn't the first time I'd been cut off like that. The familiar pattern, a dismissive wave, a stifled yawn, the tap-tap of a pen on the table. I inhaled, nodded, continued like someone changing lanes when the road is blocked, not wanting to cause a jam. Cara Lynn, my line manager, sat across from me, gave a little hang in there, wink, but when Cole shifted the topic, she only smiled and flipped a page in her notebook as if no one had just had their story cut off midway. At noon, I discovered the consolidated plan deck had just had its author name changed. The file was still the one I made, the slides still used the colors I chose, so readers wouldn't strain their eyes. The tiny corner notes were still in my style: date, time, approver. Only the first line was different: prepared by Cole H. I didn't take a screenshot, nor drop an angry icon into chat. I leaned back in my chair, pinched a paperclip between 2 fingers, and bent it into a curve. The smell of cold coffee on the desk made me think of those friendly reminders at dawn: 2:03 a.m., 2:17 a.m., 2:41 a.m., tiny bright numbers like fireflies in the night. But not poetic. I remembered how I used to reply even when the living room lamplight was only a faint glow, thinking speed was professionalism, not realizing it would become proof that I was always ready to shoulder more. Kara stopped by my desk after lunch, her voice low enough not to reach anyone else's ears. "Maya, your lighting work is rock solid. Honestly, no one keeps the overall tempo as well as you." I smiled, thanked her, and gave a light high five. Then in the group meeting, when Cole asked, "Who's going to be on the floor directing?" Kara looked down at her page, so no one would catch her eyes passing over me. I wanted to believe she was trying to keep herself safe, because in this place, people who speak up for others are quickly pushed to the edge too. The cracks didn't only come from the meeting room. They wove through emails that dropped the CC right when the audio vendor decision was finalized, through just 5 minutes, calls exactly when I was at my parents' house for dinner, through urgent messages sent before sunrise. They were also in those "keep the peace" nods, co-workers, looking at one another, choosing silence like choosing the safe menu item at a diner, not delicious, but not bad enough to draw complaints. I got used to it, like someone breaking in new shoes who knows where the blisters will form, the left ankle from having to change lanes so often, the right heel from tapping the brake. Then came the ambush meeting. The invite read, "Quick sync final tweaks. No agenda, no attachments." A glass-walled room, sunlight washing out the text on the screen. Cole stood up, hands in pockets, a measured smile. "The team needs new energy for the launch floor. To ensure the experience, Maya will support backstage." The word "backstage" fell onto the table like a bottle cap hitting hardwood, not loud, but everyone heard it. I looked around, a few glances slid toward the wall poster, an icy polite smile, a very slight nod from the person who had texted me, "Hang in there" last night. Kara cleared her throat and talked about rotating roles so everyone learns, words as soft as tissue paper. I sat up straight, put down my pen, and wrote exactly one line in my notebook, "Removed from floor." No exclamation marks, no underlines. I looked up at Cole and asked briefly, "Reason?" He tilted his head as if weighing how to arrange a fruit platter. "We've said it before, anyone can handle coordination. You're good at consolidation, so how do you feel?" I smiled and didn't answer. Because that question didn't need an answer, it was a way of saying everything had been decided, and the rest was the art of making the sidelined person think it was a development opportunity. In the afternoon, Mom called on FaceTime, the stew pot steaming behind her, the radio broadcasting the weather. She asked if work was okay. I recounted briefly, using as few words as possible. Mom said, "Yield for the sake of peace. If they won't care for you, then care for yourself by avoiding the waves." Dad, somewhere in the background, chimed in, "The team needs you. Don't quit right before 0 hour." I looked at them, two people who taught me to always keep a jacket in the car in case the weather turned cold, to always check the turn signals before merging onto the freeway. Their words were as soothing as Sunday morning chicken soup. But this time, I ended the call, set the phone face down on the table, and said out loud to myself, "I need me." That evening, I sat down to rewrite the sequence of the last 3 months. Vendors changing items at the last minute, finicky guests, a rain threat aimed right at rehearsal time, emergency patchwork that few people ever see. I wrote down the names of those who quietly helped the technician who checked for surplus power lines, the receptionist who suggested where to place water stations for older guests. The more I wrote, the straighter my back felt. Not to demand anyone's recognition, just to remind myself of the truth. No new energy ever falls from the ceiling on its own. Things run because someone is running behind them. The next morning, I arrived early, set a bag of bagels on the common table, and brewed a fresh pot of coffee. Cole walked in, said "Smells good," then glided past, as if fragrance were a duty. Kara swung by me. "You okay?" I said I was. She said, "I know it's hard, but stay soft for the long run, Maya." I looked at her, slowly. "I'll go the distance, but not on a road that forces others to keep their mouths shut." She went quiet. I saw her eyelids flutter quickly, then she turned away, like someone who had just seen a strange road sign on a familiar route. The real chill came in the afternoon, when I opened my inbox and saw another 2:03 a.m. friendly reminder, asking about an item I had sent the day before. I pulled in the old email, highlighted the section already answered, and wrote a short line, completed. Please review again. After sending it, I locked the screen, took my coat, and walked a lap around the block. Nashville this season had dry winds, red leaves, clinging to the path like a thin carpet. I thought about Dad's line, "The team needs you." Then I thought further. If a team needs me, that team will listen when I say, "Don't cut me off. Don't change the name on the slide. Don't call me at 2 a.m. because you couldn't be bothered to schedule during the day." If they won't listen, they don't need me, they need a shadow. When I got back, I started tidying up a few things: the personal plan, the strip of sticky notes around the monitor, a quote from my grandmother I'd written on a small paper, "Dignity is not for bargaining." I didn't make a fuss, I didn't quit outright. I just cleared a portion, like someone stripping off old bedsheets to put on new ones tomorrow. No one noticed, but I did. This was how I stepped out of the yielding zone I'd held up for too long. I still finished the tasks, still ran the overall picture, still sent vendor reminders on time. But with the other hand, I pulled myself out of the trap of trying to please everyone and still keep myself. On the last day before launch, the team had a stand-up on the balcony, sunlight sweeping across the concrete floor, a small flag trembling on the fence. Cole announced the run schedule, glanced at me when he said backstage. I gave a single nod, then said, "Understood." In my head, I flicked the sentence back on like a kitchen light, "I need me." I knew Mom wouldn't be happy, Dad would worry. But in the end, what parent doesn't want their daughter to come home safe, not shoved onto the shoulder and told it was for the team? That night, I called my mother and said briefly, "I'm okay." Mom said, "Come home for dinner." I said I'd be back on the weekend, before flying. She sighed, then reminded me to travel safe. I knew she had understood in her own way, silent, but putting a portion aside for me in the fridge. The cracks were still there, in the smoke-like phrases, in the renamed file, in the smile as perfect as a stock photo. But I no longer stretched myself to patch in a hurry to cover for others. As Nashville darkened and the streetlights flicked on one by one, I stood at the window looking toward the rooftop I had built like a small stage. I wasn't standing on that floor anymore, at least not in the way they wanted. And strangely, my feet felt lighter. I pulled out my phone, turned off some notifications, set a reminder, pack beach gear. The night wind blew through the curtains, the smell of wet grass slipped into the room. Somewhere, a late ice cream truck still rolled by, its bell chiming slowly. I smiled faintly. The storm might come, or it might not. But my wall knew how to stand now. Even with a few hairline cracks, cracks that reminded me of limits, of what I chose to keep. And of the sentence I would not take back. I need me. After the last day, sitting and looking toward the rooftop, I had built over 3 months and telling myself I need me. I knew that what came next wasn't another round of arguments, but tidying up my part neatly, hitting PTO, and moving my life out of the toxic wind zone, not running away, just changing routes. The next morning, I met Tessa Fisher at a cafe on Music Row. A small place, glass doors pasted with posters for weekend shows, low wooden tables, a cactus pot by the window. The barista asked if I wanted an extra shot of espresso. I shook my head and asked for a regular black. Tessa arrived on time as always, in a faded denim jacket, hair tied back, a notebook full of stickers in her hand. She pulled out a chair and, as soon as she sat, asked, "Did you sleep?" I shrugged. We sat quietly for a few beats, listening to the steady whir of the grinder, the smell of fresh waffles spreading. Tessa opened her notebook, flipped a few pages, but didn't write anything. She looked at me, her voice direct and light like when signing a new artist. "Your name stands on every contract. You don't owe anyone." I gave a half smile. "Seems I owe myself more." Tessa nodded. "Then pay it now. Hit PTO, write the handover, step off the floor on the very day they plan to prove they don't need you." In fact, they need you most because they're afraid. I stayed silent, hearing the glass door open and close, new customers stepping in, the bell chiming. Nashville footsteps just hurried enough, just polite enough. I set down the coffee, the wood warmed under the cup, and suddenly everything was clear. Not every hurt needs a dialogue. Some things only need actions that are precise, clean, and correct. Leaving the cafe, sunlight slipped through the trees and shone on the signs of the record labels. I stood in the shade, opened the company calendar, chose the launch day, and slid it to PTO. A notification popped up. "Are you sure?" I tapped yes without hesitation. My finger slid across the screen like sliding along a thread already decided and knotted. Then I sat in the car, turned on a light cool AC, and drafted the handover email on my phone. I opened a note with the existing task list, shifting the tone from the person holding everything to the person handing over responsibly. I kept the email subject short and clear: handover, launch rooftop, Maya Cole. In the first line, I wrote, "As discussed, from date X I will be on PTO. Below is the status of each item and the point of contact." I didn't complain, didn't blame, didn't let emotions spill into the words. I went section by section as I always do when finalizing a program: venue, Carl operations manager, Skyline rooftop. Contract signed, access schedule, 6 a.m., 11 p.m. Key pickup at lobby, contact security 24 hours in advance. Items provided by venue: 20 high tables, 6 long tables, 3 ice bins. Note: elevator A requires a keycard, request reset the next morning. Catering: Thera Catering, lead, Honeycomb. Menu finalized, with non-gluten and nut-free options. Setup time, 3 p.m. Weak point: need 2 more cases of sparkling water. Note: Thera needs a guide from the east parking lot. Decor Brent, decor and florals. Floral layout per attached file. String lights tested, recheck outlet near the northwest corner. Contingency: 20 additional smokeless candles in storage. I attached the files: runbook, power diagram, vendor list with verified phone numbers. In the new owner section, I wrote succinctly: Cole Harrington, overall floor lead, per Cole's announcement in the meeting on. All contacts have been informed of the transition. I CC'd Kara, a few critical contacts, and added myself on follow. Before sending, I reread, deleted 2 extra words, changed tuner to please, so the sentences stood firm. Then I sent it. It felt like dropping a parcel at the right address, with a squarely placed label. Hands off the box, heart off the burden. The phone buzzed a few times. Kara replied quickly: "Thanks, Maya. Handover is very clear." Cole was brief: "Received." A vendor dropped a thumbs up emoji. I put the phone away, rolled down the car window for the breeze, maple leaves rustling on the sidewalk. The city didn't change because of one email, but inside, I felt an invisible frame click back into alignment. In the afternoon, I went home, opened the closet, and pulled the charcoal suitcase into the living room. I folded clothes like someone who had decided: 2 light dresses, a white shirt, khaki shorts, worn-in sneakers, sunglasses, sunscreen, a small pouch for chargers and earphones. I placed a black-covered notebook and my favorite felt-tip pen in the suitcase, plus a pack of the tea bags my grandmother used to drink. The zipper running along the edge sounded solid, like a final sentence that had found its period. I sat on the rug, opened the laptop, and typed BNA HNL. The Honolulu booking page appeared with options for direct, layover, window, or aisle. I chose a morning flight, a window seat. In the reason for trip box, I left it blank. Not business, not visiting anyone, just going. I entered my card info, skimmed the baggage insurance section, unchecked all add-ons, clicked confirm. The screen showed, booked, with a picture of a sun-drenched beach. I leaned back in the chair, looked at the ceiling, and listened to my heartbeat slow, even. In the evening, I set my phone on the kitchen counter, switched to Do Not Disturb, and put the kettle on. I played soft instrumental guitar. The scent of tea rose like a warm towel laid across the chest. I opened the notebook and wrote a few lines, sending them to no one. I am not running away. I am choosing myself. I remembered my mother's words, yield for peace. I smiled and added a line. I'm creating my own peace. I wrote Tessa's name, underlined it with a stroke of thanks, and drew a little checkbox list for the morning: print the ticket, book a ride to the airport. Bring my grandmother's memorial card as a talisman to remind me to keep my heart straight. I closed the notebook, turned off the main light, and left the kitchen's soft yellow lamp on. Outside, traffic thinned, the scent of damp grass drifted through the frame of the window. My back rested against the chair, my shoulders slipping down from the weight of dozens of pre-dawn emails. On the night before the trip, Nashville was quieter than usual. I drew the curtains, checked the suitcase one last time, put the sunglasses case in the carry-on, and placed my passport next to my wallet. I texted Tessa, flying tomorrow. She replied immediately, send me a sunrise pic. I smiled and answered, will do. The phone lit up again with a Slack notification. The message popped up, then disappeared when Do Not Disturb blocked it. I didn't touch it. I thought about the launch floor, the already tested string lights, the finalized menu, the footsteps that would crowd that space without knowing who had tightened each wire and tied each knot. There was a twinge, but I let it pass through me like a cold gust, sliding past my collar, acknowledged, not clutched. I showered in warm water, changed into a soft tee, took out a blank luggage tag and wrote Maya E. and my phone number. I stuck it to the suitcase handle, like sticking a name tag onto myself, simple and sufficient. Before bed, I stepped onto the porch and switched on the front light like every house in the neighborhood does each night, looking at the quiet street and the neatly lined navy mailboxes. There was a very American sense of peace. No one asks where you're going or where you've been. Neighbors just nod if they happen to meet, and everyone understands each other's boundaries. I went back in and slipped my grandmother's memorial card into the passport pouch. She would go with me, not for me to lean on, but to remind me of her lesson. So from the wrong side so the right side lies smooth. This trip is a hidden stitch, not for show, but meant to hold. Before turning off the light, I looked at the phone screen one last time. A strip of notifications dimmed under the layer of silence. I whispered in my head as if dubbing my own voice. Tomorrow, I take off not to run, but to see life from a height far enough to recognize that that launch floor is not the entire sky. I turned off the light, pulled up the blanket, and heard the wall clock ticking steadily. Sometimes, in the dark, Tessa's words lit up again. Your name stands on every contract. You don't owe anyone. I added the other half, except yourself. And as my eyes closed, I knew I had begun to settle that debt with a clean handover email, a decisive PTO click, a light suitcase, and a ticket pointed toward the Sunday. Dawn touched the edge of the curtain as I rolled my suitcase out of the house, the wheels crossing the wooden floor like a steady drumbeat. Last night I'd hit PTO. The handover email had been sent, the ticket booked, now only the final test remained. Would my silence stand firm when launch day exploded? Nashville Airport in the morning carried the smell of roasted coffee and clean soap. I passed through the automatic doors, a rush of cold air came in, and then closed behind me. The line before TSA snaked along, everyone holding a bit of hurry but keeping their voices low, the exact early morning manner of cities just waking up. I pulled out the slim wallet, took the boarding pass, printed with HNL, and a row of window seat numbers. The security officer gave a habitual smile, scanned the code, said, "Have a good one." On the other side of the scanner, I put my shoes back on, tied the laces, set the phone face down in the tray, then slipped it into my coat pocket. Slack was quiet like a lake before a gust. No pings, no emojis dropped, no quick one questions. That quiet made a line from last night echo in my ears. Is silence surrender? I thought of the boundary frame I'd just built inside. I wasn't turning off the phone out of pique. I just wasn't putting my hand out anymore to catch what others had intentionally let slip. Gate B12 grew crowded. The boarding group calls sounded evenly. The electronic board flipped flight numbers. The indicator light shifted from red to green. I bought a waffle wrapped in paper and a black coffee, found a seat near the glass. The pain-reflected part of my face not heavily made up, hair tied neat, and the white plane resting amid thin streaks of mist. I looked at the boarding pass with the 3 letters HNL lined up neatly, like an abbreviated promise. The phone buzzed lightly, not Slack, an automated baggage confirmation email. I took a sip of coffee, breathed out a plume, saw the person next to me pull out a laptop, open PowerPoint, type a title. In another stretch of life, that was me too. The rooftop downtown was waking in a strangely noisy way. I wasn't there, but the images stitched from months of muscle memory came clear as if I were standing on the balcony, high tables not yet aligned on axis, string lights not taut enough, floor rugs needing to cover a dark concrete streak. A slightly off-key vendor message flew into my inbox, Brent here. 1 crate of centerpieces missing, truck stuck in East Lot. I checked the time. If it were the old me, this would be when I'd call security to open the side gate, ask a porter to push a cart, reshuffle setup, order to fill the gap. But today, I just watched. Slack stayed quiet, as if the whole team was sprinting flat out without enough breath to type a single SOS. Silence was no longer a blank wall. It had a faint sound, a bottle cap popping askew, knives and forks clinking in the catering kitchen, someone drawing out an when they don't know what to decide. When it was time to board the first group, the door opened, the line formed neatly. I got on the plane, stowed the suitcase in the overhead, slid into the seat, laid my hands on my thighs, feeling the cool of the seat belt. Outside the round window, the ground shimmered. The phone buzzed again. I glanced at the screen. Instagram showed a story tagging the brand. A guest who arrived early had snapped the logo on the LED screen. The color was off, red turned orange, the backdrop turning sunset into a harsh neon. Under the story was the word tacky with a grimacing face icon. I set the phone down, partly amused because tacky felt exactly like a red pen mark on an aesthetics exam, partly steadied not because they were in trouble, but because the truth had named itself. No need for me to pull the curtain. A while later, another story. The printed menu had a wrong item. The vegetarian dish turned into one with cheese. The poster asked if this was a surprise twist. Next came a short video from the stage corner, the light preset at the wrong temperature, the person test micing looking sickly under the 2 cold lamps. All these had contingency lines in my runbook: smokeless candles to warm the light, spare tablecloths to cover scratches, a backup outlet at the northwest corner, the lighting tech's hotline. All of it was in yesterday morning's handover. What was happening wasn't for lack of a plan. It was because someone thought, anyone can do it. The phone flashed an incoming call, HR's number. I let it ring out to missed call. A text followed, politely lined up, Maya, can you jump in? Team needs support. I read it, and heard in my head, HR's familiar voice, smooth as a freshly polished tabletop, always choosing support instead of rescue. I set the phone on the tray, kept looking at the cottony clouds outside. In less than a minute, Kara called. I let it ring a beat, then picked up. Maya, she said softly, they need you. I heard wind rush past the mic, the faint sound of a glass door opening and closing. I remembered her private midday praise for my steady hand, remembered her turning a page without looking at me during the meeting. I know, I said, voice as calm as reading an oven manual. I've handed everything over. All the contacts are in the email. Kara hesitated. I understand, it's just. I cut in gently, not sharply, I'm at the boarding gate. I won't jump onto the floor when I've said I'm off the floor. The other end went quiet for a long beat, then she exhaled, I'm sorry. Safe travels. I didn't say, it's okay. I just said, thank you, and ended the call. No slam, no resentment. A door closed softly. The plane's PA came on with the safety briefing. The flight attendant showed how to fasten the belt, how to put on the oxygen mask. I muted the phone and switched to airplane mode. But before the signal dropped, one more call slipped in coal. I let it buzz in my hand, then answered. "This is your mess," he began, no greeting, no preamble. "Logo colors off, centerpieces missing, lights wrong." "What kind of runbook did you write?" I heard the bustle around him, footsteps pounding, someone asking, "Need more ice?" I didn't explain that the logo color was off because the preset clearly noted had to be tested with the source file. That the centerpieces were missing because the truck was stuck in the east lot and I had noted the security number. That the lights were wrong because they didn't run scene 2 as I'd marked. I didn't say a word. "Cole," I replied evenly, I handed everything over. "If you need it, read yesterday afternoon's email." "Don't teach me to read email," he snapped. "The team is on fire." I looked out the window, the sky opening into a flat blue like a lake, clouds rolling into soft mountain ranges. "Good luck," I said. "I'm boarding now." He threw back an unbelievable and hung up. I set the phone to silent, buckled up, leaned my head against the seat. I didn't shake. The trembling had all been spent on those 2 jolts out of bed to open the laptop. The plane taxied. The apron receded, baggage carts zipped like little beetles. I closed my eyes as the wheels left the ground, felt my chest dip and then settle. Silence now wasn't empty. It had the murmur of engines, the rustle of safety cards, a kid in the row behind asking, "How long till we get to the beach?" I asked myself again, is silence surrender? In this country, people respect it when you hang a closed sign if you're not open today, as long as you hang it at the right time and state the reason clearly. I'd hung PTO with a clean email and a clear list. I wasn't sneaking out, I left through the front door. Altitude climbed, the city shrank into tiny squares, rooftops like matchbox lids. I put my hand on my breast pocket and touched my grandmother's memorial card. I'd brought along a thin piece of paper heavy as a reminder. I whispered in my head the line I'd write in my notebook tonight, "I'm not running away. I'm choosing myself." In the cabin, warm light lay across the armrests, the smell of coffee drifted down from the galley. A flight attendant rolled the service cart up and asked if I wanted water. I nodded and asked for extra ice. The plastic cup felt cool in my hand. I took a long sip and watched a swath of white cloud tear silk across the sky. Down below, the rooftop was surely patching section by section. Brent filling in flowers with candles, Thera swapping the vegetarian dish, the tech adjusting the preset. Someone would learn how to call the right person at the right time. Someone would notice the difference between cold silence and responsible silence. There would be a few more stories tagging the brand, a few harsh comments, and evening would still come. As for me, I was learning to take responsibility for my part, and to release what wasn't mine, like how Americans drive on multi-lane roads. Keep your lane, signal clearly if you need to change. Don't flash high beams in someone's face to force your way. The plane entered a thick sea of clouds and shuddered lightly. I opened the black-covered notebook from my bag, wrote a short line, then closed it. Silence isn't bowing the head, it's the distance far enough to see who's tripping over their own shadow. When the plane broke through the clouds, the light burst brilliant. I smiled, rested my forehead against the cool window frame. The phone lay still in my pocket, as quiet as a bell with a cup over it. And this time, silence was the sound I needed most. As the plane pierced through the last layer of clouds and the color of the water below opened like a sheet of blue glass, I understood. The noisy part had been left behind. Ahead was a place where even the smallest voice could be heard, as long as I turned off the unnecessary rings in my life. Honolulu greeted me with the scent of sea salt and plumeria drifting on the wind, the kind of air that lets your shoulders drop a notch without trying. I checked into a small hotel a few blocks from Waikiki, a room with a slanted view of the ocean, a balcony with 2 rattan chairs and a small round table just big enough for a coconut water. I set the suitcase down, stepped out to the veranda, listened to the waves and the clacking of flip-flops on the sidewalk. Everyone slows down here, even the service carts roll more gently. I placed my phone face down on the table. Turned on, Do Not Disturb, like lowering the curtain for a cinema with only one audience member. From my backpack, I took out a white postcard printed with a sunset behind Diamond Head, sat down, and wrote the first line with a black felt tip pen, "My silence has sound." I paused the pen to listen. The sound of the waves was the word breathe, the rustle of the sandbar was the word enough, and my voice in my head was a gentle permission to myself. Here, I'm allowed to sit still. The next morning, I took the postcard down to the beach, used it as a bookmark for a novel borrowed from the lobby, occasionally looking up at the people learning to surf in the distance. A little boy fell, then crawled back onto the board, grinned wide, and paddled out again. The whole beach laughed in the American way, loud, clear, unafraid of bothering anyone. The phone lay still in the tote, buzzing now and then with a faraway notification. When I picked it up to turn off a few apps, a post from Tessa flashed across the lock screen. The first line appeared like a knock: "Boundaries are the minimum courtesy." She didn't mention the company's name, didn't detail my story, only wrote about people herded into corners and taught to be soft to fit the culture, when that culture is the cloth thrown over all the light-handed abuses. I read it on the veranda of a small cafe facing the sea, condensation purling on a cold brew, sunlight sprinkling the wooden table like gold dust. Below the post, comments poured in like a stream newly cleared. Someone told of having their name removed from a deck at the last minute. Someone told of being removed from the room when a meeting changed direction. Someone told of 2 a.m. emails demanding files only to be told at 9 a.m. Someone else already did it. Among those shares, no one was screaming. They simply spoke in this place's polite manner, but directly, and empathy flared like fire leaping from match to match, quiet yet bright. I pulled my chair into the shade, and the more I read, the straighter I sat today. One comment said, "I took time off to keep a promise to my parents, and the company said I lacked team spirit. I took it anyway." Another left 2 simple lines: "Stop glorifying burnout. Rest is not a crime." In Honolulu, those words had their own sound, like the dry clap of waves when the wind stands still. I didn't reply, didn't tap a heart. I just laid the phone face down, took a sip of water, and smiled to myself. Turns out, when you step across your rightful boundary, others in cities half a country apart still recognize that movement and nod, even if only in their hearts. In the afternoon, I walked along Kalakaua Avenue, peeked into shops, selling Aloha shirts, stopped at a shave ice cart, chose pineapple and strawberry. As I ate, the phone buzzed with an unexpected email. "Aloha, Maya, we heard about how you coordinate and how you set boundaries. Next week, we have an outdoor music festival, need a process consultant. If it fits, let's discuss terms." Signed by a local arts organization. I read it twice, not missing the word terms. A few minutes later, another email from a corporate gala company in Seattle: "We're rebuilding our event process. Important, respect work hour boundaries, no messages after 8 p.m. Can you share your framework?" Next came an indie couple, sending a message via Instagram, saying they were about to release an EP in Austin and wanted to do a mini live show, quiet but refined. They wrote, "We respect boundaries." I laughed out loud and set down the shave ice. That sentence felt like a breeze blowing over you at noon, cooling and reminding you that you have skin. That night, I laid the emails out like table linens, reading each line carefully. I opened a new file, titled it, "Working Conditions Maya E." Then bullet pointed as if writing a menu: "No pings after 8 p.m, unless agreed, runbook locked at T72 hours. No author changes after submission, Meetings have an agenda and recorded decisions, payment 30/70, post-mortem with limits scope, time, fee. I looked at the list and saw it wasn't excessive, it was basic courtesy between people. I replied gently, inserting the item, this time I'm setting the conditions, not as a challenge, but like placing a white picket fence around my garden, anyone entering can see clearly where the path is. On my second day in Waikiki, I woke early, laced my running shoes, looped along the damp sand, watched sailboats in the distance. On the way back, my phone lit up with a familiar name, Kara. I stood under the shade of a palm, let it ring one beat, then answered. Her voice was thin as paper, but sincere. I'm sorry, I stayed silent that day. I was afraid of losing my seat. I looked at the patches of sunlight, skipping on the sidewalk, took a breath, and replied, I understand. I was afraid of losing myself. Two fears set side by side, no comparison, and I heard something ease on both ends. Kara added softly, if you want, I'll document everything you did in the final report. I nodded, though she couldn't see. If that feels right, please do. Not for me, for the one who comes after. We said brief goodbyes. I didn't add a word to ease her embarrassment. In this place, kindness also needs just enough silence not to turn into a performance. At noon, while I sat under a sun umbrella finishing a page, the screen flashed Cole's name. I let it buzz 3 beats, then opened the message. He wrote, I was wrong. Post-mortem X3 fee. I looked at the short words lined up like plastic cups on a banquet table, neat and emotionless. I knew post-mortem X3 fee was the bandage they like to use when the seams burst away to pay a price while saving face, like adding a tip so you don't have to apologize with your eyes. I set the postcard down on the sand, breathed slowly, let that message lie there like an unopened shell. Not out of pride, because I was busy listening to the waves and my heartbeat rather than shortcuts of justification. I closed the phone, held the postcard up to admire it. The sun over Diamond Head turned red, not the harsh red of yesterday's off-color logo, but warm like a greeting. That evening, I went to the night market, bought a small lei, stood listening to a street band playing Somewhere Over the Rainbow on ukulele. A toddler ran circles, his mother laughed and apologized when he bumped me. I waved it off, said it's okay, and thought, so many things would be okay if people spoke truthfully, apologized sincerely, and set real boundaries. I stopped at a card stall, bought a few more postcards, sat on the hotel steps to write. The second card I wrote to my future self. If one day you're tired, remember Waikiki, where silence also has sound, and that sound is your own. The third for Tessa, your post didn't name anyone, but it awakened so many. I stamped them, wrote the addresses, and dropped them into the red mailbox at the corner, my hand touching the textured paint like touching a freshly repainted resolve. The next day, I received replies to last night's emails. The arts organization agreed to the conditions and wanted to add a mid-shift break for the whole team. The corporate gala replied, fully aligned, and asked if I could do internal training on boundary etiquette. The indie couple sent a rehearsal schedule, with an added line, if you're tired, we'll reschedule, no need to explain. I read and felt that respect wasn't just a word on a wall anymore. It was meeting times, quiet hours, the roll holder's name not crossed out. I confirmed each one, adding a line I was getting used to. If there are changes, please notify by T48 hours. After sending, I rested my hands, leaned back, and listened to the wind waft through the rows of palms like someone slowly turning a page. On my last day in Honolulu, I woke early to watch the sunrise from the beach. The sun rose like a large coin, the ocean changing color layer by layer. I took out my grandmother's memorial card and placed it beside my own postcard, 2 thin pieces of paper side by side on damp sand. I whispered, I hear you. I heard my own voice, the voices of strangers who had commented under Tessa's post, Tessa's voice that wrote the right and enough words, Kara's voice for daring to call. And even Cole's late voices are still a kind of voice, reminding that each person chooses their path and pays the fare for that path. I slipped both into my pocket, walked slowly along footprints others had left and the waves erased. I knew the flight back wouldn't feel as heavy as the one here. The suitcase wasn't lighter, but my heart carried fewer invisible items. At noon, I finished writing an email I had promised myself to write clearly. I will not participate in any post-mortem activities for the recent event. All instructions are in the handover. If consultation is needed, please schedule and apply the fees per the attached conditions. I signed it, added a good luck, courteous enough, and hit send. A few minutes later, Cole replied, understood. I didn't feel satisfied, I only felt a door close properly. In the afternoon, I bought a small keychain engraved with Aloha, and hung it on my suitcase like hanging a reminder. Hello and goodbye can both be gentle and clear. On the last night, I returned to Waikiki Beach, sat on the sand, and listened to the city breathing at its slow rhythm. In the sky, planes drew thin lines of light. On the sea, ripples lapped like soft laughter. I opened the postcard again, read my silence has sound, then added a thin pen stroke, and that sound leads the way. I put the pen away, looked up, and knew that tomorrow, upon returning, I would step into new emails and new meeting schedules, but this time, with the white picket fence firmly staked around my own yard. On this shore, I learned one more thing. Sometimes the clearest answer isn't to speak louder, but to set the phone down, listen to the waves, and let your voice ring at the right volume. At the right time, in the right place. Returning to the city in the morning, I rolled my suitcase across the lobby of a new office, heard the wheels on the cool stone floor, and realized something very clearly. When your steps know the way, the past halts on its own like an automatic door that no longer recognizes you. I signed contracts with partners who had said in advance respect boundaries, opened a work schedule neat as a drawer that fits the hand, and left what used to be noisy to stay still in its proper place. That noon, in the glass elevator, I saw myself from an angle that didn't tremble, shoulders lowered, eyes unflinching. I took out the postcard from Waikiki and wrote another line next to the old sentence. You don't need the room to own your voice. My voice doesn't need a room's permission to be raised. I chose to leave by the straight path, without looking back, to count who believed, who understood, to choose silence when needed and speak clearly when I must. The new scheduling emails all pass through the white wooden gate I built. Decent hours, transparent authorship, post-mortems with limits. No more nights jolting awake at 2-3 a.m. Instead, afternoons opening the window, letting the sunlight rest on the desk without feeling guilty. I do not retaliate. I answer by boundaries, by peace, by taking my own road while still greeting politely, smiling, and moving on. Thank you for coming with me to this page of the story. If this small journey touched you at some bend in the road, please like and subscribe, so the algorithm doesn't accidentally push us apart in the next parts. I will keep telling quietly how we hold on to our own voice in unfamiliar rooms, and how peace finds its way back.